Now, as an alternative to physical storage, we can use disk files ourselves. So we can use the fallocate command. We're setting the length of the file, essentially the file size, to be 1 gig. And we're just calling it, well, you can see the name as well as I can see the name. We can then go through and link the disk file to a device. We're using -F, so we can find the next available device file, but we want to also display it, so --show. We can then go through and list our block devices, and we should see the new block device. So this is our first step, so why don't we move out to our command line and really see this working? Now we have a little bit of the last demonstration showing, so why don't we start off by clearing that, Control and L, and then just list the contents of my home directory. So I've got some directories that are as standard, and then of course the ISO file that we looked at. We're going to create a new file now, and we're going to use fallocate. We're going to set the length of this file, and we're going to set it to 1 gig. We want to use this as a disk file, so we want a little bit of space. So if I go through and put -L, 1 uppercase G, and then we can go through and name the image, and let's just call it disk1.img, although to be honest, the name of the file isn't really important. Now when I go through and look at ls-lh, we can see then in human readable format, we can see the size of that file, and it is in fact 1 gig. But let's verify how important the -h is. When I look at it without the h, then it's much more difficult to understand the size. So let's clear the screen and take a look now at having created the file, how much it's affected our root file system. So as I go through disk free -h on the root file system, we used to have 57 gig available, but now I've got 56 gig available. So we can see that it is dynamic when we're looking at these figures. Having created the disk file, though, we want to link it to a device file, and that's where our good friend LO setup comes in. This needs to be run as the root user, so let's use sudo. Now I could specify the device file that I want, but because we've got so many in use, it's going to be easier to use the -F to find the next available. But it won't actually tell me which one it's using, so I have to ask it to show me the device file that it has chosen, and then point it to our disk file. Of course, I've got to authenticate, but you know what? I think I got the password wrong, so let me try again. Ooh, and with a successful password, would you believe we get in? And then --show is telling me that we've made use of /dev/loop16. So let's go back to our good friend ls block, and let's not forget about the -i for include, and loop devices are a major number of 7. So we can see then our glorious loop16 sitting down the bottom there of 1 gig in size. Now, of course, now that we have got this, we can look at perhaps partitioning up the disk so we can start creating our file systems. Are you ready for that?